About an hour from now, I'm going to be in a lot of pain voluntarily for data. I got injured at the worst possible moment, in the middle of the best marathon training block of my life. And I've been asking myself one question ever since. How much did I actually lose? Today, I find out. This test has felt in equal parts exciting and terrifying to book, because sometimes not knowing makes things easier. Knowing exactly where you're at makes it very, very real, because data doesn't lie, and there is nowhere to hide. And before I can talk about how much fitness I have actually lost, I want to give you the context coming into this. Last September, I picked up an injury. I was on the cusp of completing the best training block of my career to date and preparing for the Chicago Marathon. Off the back of that injury, I had 3 months of basically no training at all. I couldn't cross train, I couldn't run, and I gradually started rehabbing and returning to gym work. And from there, the return to running was extremely conservative. It was more about making sure biomechanically and strength-wise I was up to it rather than gaining any fitness. So from late January this year, I have gradually returned to what I would consider actual training. Structured weeks, some workouts, mileage ramping up ever so gradually, and my knee getting quieter and quieter amongst all of it. Currently, at the time of filming this video, I am at roughly 60 to 70 miles per week. That's in comparison to a pretty regular 80 to 90 miles per week outside of a marathon block for me, and during a marathon block, I'm at between 100 to 120 miles for 10, 12 plus weeks. So I guess what could have been from last autumn, preparing for the Chicago block, preparing to run the marathon of my life, makes this testing and these results today feel somewhat more loaded. Because when you get your body into that kind of shape and you're ready to put out an incredible performance, but you don't quite get to do it, you lose all of that, get as unfit as you've ever been, and then slowly start working back to some kind of normality in training. There's a very real feeling of having lost something in that performance and that fitness that we are never guaranteed to get back. So in an ideal world today, what I'm hoping to hear is that Phily, you're in a fantastic spot. You're on track to get back to where you were and even better. And this injury, it's just a little drop in the ocean. What I am genuinely scared of hearing is this length of time off that you have never taken before after years and years of consistency has put a real dent in where you're at. And it's gonna take a very long time to pull that back. And that's gonna involve lots of hours, lots of days, lots of weeks, lots of months of consistency, and you're not even close yet. And we are testing 3 things today. Lactate, or my threshold profile, finding the point at which my body starts to struggle to clear the lactate building up in my muscles, which tells us a lot about my race potential. Running economy, which is essentially how efficient you are as a runner, how much energy you're burning to run at any given pace, and my VO2 max. That's your engine size. The maximum amount of oxygen your body can use when you're going flat out. And if that sounds alien to you, or ever so slightly high level, that is fine. The sciencey bit is coming later. I think it was not long before I ran like 2:29, and then I never got testing during the Berlin block.
Yeah.
And John thinks I was in 2:23 shape before Chicago. I don't have the pudding to prove it.
Yeah.
So
No, don't
the
worry.
testing or the PB.
So what are we doing today?
So today we're going to be taking Phily through what I call sub-max and max testing. That basically just means that she'll be running at speeds that are quite easy to moderately difficult for the first test. And I'll be taking something called blood lactate concentration. That's just going to give me an indication of how hard she's working. From that, I'll be able to make some training zones. I'm then going to give her a 10-minute rest, and then we're going to move on to the max test, which will get our VO2 max, which hopefully quite a few people will be familiar with. And you know, if we think of a car, we're looking at her engine in the max test, and the whole test is, or the whole process today is just kind of giving us a few diagnostics as to what's going on. So we'll take running economy, which is pretty much miles per gallon, so a measure of how much energy she uses at set running speeds, the engine, which will be our VO2 max, and then also we're looking for something called lactate threshold and lactate turn point. Don't really know where they fit into the car analogy, maybe something to do with gears. Basically, we're just going to work out what paces she starts to find things difficult. That will inform training and hopefully be able to give some really nice training zones for the next sort of 3 months or so.
that John takes great pleasure in doing, inflicting pain on his athletes.
Amazing. And what is the actual structure of the tests?
So first test will be 3-minute stages, starting off at a really easy pace, and then there will be a 30-second rest period for me to take some blood samples between each one, and we'll increase by 1 kilometer per hour with each stage. So it's just progressive in nature. Second test, really low maintenance for me. I don't actually need to do much during the test. Won't be low maintenance for Phily though. She'll be working pretty hard, but there will be an increase in the gradient of the treadmill every minute, and she will stop when she feels like stopping. So it'll be a pretty hard test. We call it volitational exhaustion, but basically she'll run until she doesn't want to run anymore. That will be the end of the test. Lactate's something that is always produced by the body. So even at rest now, I'm probably sitting at around 1 millimole of lactate. That's just a concentration number. Common misconception, and often something you'll hear a lot from commentators on the telly, they will talk about something called lactic acid, and they'll say that lactic acid is a byproduct. It's not. It's actually an energy source, and something that the body finds really useful.
The lactate threshold test involves running at progressively faster speeds on the treadmill, with a tiny finger prick blood sample taken at the end of each stage to measure my blood lactate.
It's an indication of how hard someone's working, and from that we can get something called lactate threshold.
LT1 equals lactate threshold 1, the point where lactate first starts creeping up. Below this, you're in your all-day zone, fat burning, sustainable, where zone 2 ends and where zone 3 begins.
It used to be in the past that people would think lactate threshold would be somewhat equivalent to a pace that you can hold for a marathon, probably longer nowadays with shoes and the fueling that we use, but it's our first sort of time point where exercise starts to feel just that little bit harder.
LT2 is your lactate turn point. That's the second big jump. Above this, lactate rises continuously until you stop.
I would define this as the point where exercise does start to get quite hard, and you're no longer in what we call in physiology a steady state. You're starting to produce a lot of lactate because those anaerobic systems are having to get involved a little bit more. And this is where what people usually term the threshold, and can be really important when it comes to threshold training. So training just slightly below that level for lots and lots of reps is helpful to pushing it on. If you're after symmetry for the video, that's not what you're currently got.
No, it's good.
Cover the breathing piece with your palm and then breathe out. Is air escaping from anywhere apart from the hole? Perfect, we're good.
Today that we didn't get George to fully deep while we were in the lab is running economy. Economy in its simplest terms is how efficient your body is. And I don't want you to think about this as how efficiently someone is moving, like eyes on, how efficient do they look? This is at a cellular level, and it's measured as oxygen cost per kilometer of running. So lower is obviously better. That means you're using less fuel to go at the same speed. A running economy of below 200 is highly efficient. It indicates you require less energy and fuel to maintain a specific speed, allowing you to run faster and longer with less fatigue. One thing that was super encouraging from the testing was that my economy scores across stages were remarkably consistent. I was hovering around 181 to 188 milliliters per kilogram per kilometer across all speeds. That's actually a real positive from the report. Even after months off, the mechanical efficiency that I have built up over years of training is largely still there. In terms of things that are going to affect your economy, they're things like fatigue, your form breaking down at the end of long runs, returning from injury, especially if you've got compensatory movement patterns, and I guess a combination of all of those things have probably been at play the last few months. But the good news is, economy comes back much faster than raw fitness. And then there's the fuel shift. what the economy testing also measures is the fuel source that you're using at the speed you're going. At easy paces, I am burning roughly half fat and half carbohydrates. By the time I hit 19 kilometers per hour, which is 3 minutes and 9 seconds per kilometer, or 5:05 minute miling, my body switched to almost entirely carbohydrate. And that is the data we get from this mask that I'm wearing throughout the whole test, which measures the ratio of CO2 out and O2 in. That is what gives us these numbers. Now, the reason these numbers matters is, as we all know, carbohydrates are a limited fuel source. There is only so much you can carry in your muscles as stored glycogen, which is why we fuel during the marathon and why we carb load beforehand. Knowing exactly when your body makes that switch, with the knowledge that before that you're using a combination of the two, that can help you understand how hard you can push before you're burning through those reserves too quickly, which ultimately is what's happening when people hit the wall.
You're going to hop on the treadmill, and then what's going to happen is we're going to keep a fixed speed of, I'm going to go with 16, maybe 16.5k an hour, because I don't want to be on the treadmill for ages.
Yeah.
I'm going to set it to 16.5k an hour, so it's just a little bit above your LT.
Okay.
Predicted LT.
Yeah.
Obviously, you graph it first. And then what's going to happen, every minute, I'm just going to increase by 1% until you turn around and go, I don't want to go anymore.
My least favourite bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, when do I say that?
If I get involved,
yeah,
it's just because I'm thinking things are getting unsafe.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to get involved.
Okay.
I never normally do, but it is.
Accepted.
It'll be completely up to you. So.
What's the estimated, like, I mean, does that depend on your VO2 max? Is it basically when you tap out, that's where your VO2 max is?
If I've got the speed right, everyone will fail between 8 and 12 minutes. Okay. If I've got the speed wrong, you might tap out a little bit sooner. If I've got the speed very wrong, you might tap out a little bit later.
Cool.
Don't worry about the time. You just keep running until you don't want to run anymore.
Okay, but
any
like
errors?
Because it's all in your head, right? In terms of when you decide to stop, basically. Yeah, there's some physiological.
Multifactorial.
But like, if I tap out at 8 versus 10, does that impact the data that we get?
It shouldn't do. If you've gone right to your maximum, it doesn't make a difference.
Oh, it's just gonna be so much fun. VO2 max is the headline number. It's the maximum rate at which your body can take in, transport, and use oxygen, and it is the ceiling of your aerobic engine. The test involves pushing the treadmill to maximal effort. Elevation increases until you literally cannot continue. And you can also do it with speed changing too, but it takes longer, and so it's just a little bit more taxing on the body. Regardless, it is objectively awful. For context, an average untrained woman has a VO2 max of roughly 35 to 40. A recreational runner might be around 45 to 55, and elite female distance runners are typically 60 to 70 plus. Tour de France cyclists can hit 80 plus. I've seen mine at 68 back in the past in 2023, and today it was 65. So my VO2 max came out at 65.2. That's milliliters per kilogram per minute, and my VO2 max, which is the speed at which I hit that ceiling, was 21.2 kilometers per hour, or 250 per kilometer pace. That's a pretty cool result, because it means my VO2 max is in a really good place. There's some research to show that it does decrease as you get older, and I'm also coming back from an injury. But the most surprising result is still coming. Later in the video, we are going to put that VO2 max into some important context for some really exciting results. Is a VO2 max of 65 good after a few months off? Honest answer, yes, but it's hard to know exactly where I was at before. I didn't have my VO2 max tested in September, a week before I got injured. Research suggests that VO2 max starts declining after 2 to 3 weeks of inactivity, with significant drops of 10 to 15% possible after 2 months. The fact that it is still in the elite range is genuinely very encouraging, but the thresholds are where the real marathon-specific work needs to start happening. Because my VO2 max at this number really isn't limiting me in the marathon. So, how much did I actually lose? The nuanced answer is my VO2 max is holding up really well at 65.2. Running economy is in a great spot because years of miles doesn't just disappear, but the thresholds, that's LT1 and LT2, are where I've got some work to do. And that's really the marathon specific fitness. It's the ability to sustain harder paces for longer, and it takes time and consistent training to rebuild those and improve those numbers. But here's the reframe that made me feel really excited about these results. VO2 max is not my limiter right now, and it probably won't be for a very long time. It's what we're gonna call a ceiling for now, but I am nowhere near bumping my head up on that ceiling for the marathon. What actually determines marathon performance is how close you can get to that ceiling and sustain it for longer efforts. And that is entirely about where your LT1 and your LT2 sit as a percentage of your VO2 max. So I had a little chat to Pacemaker Dan. If you watched the Berlin Marathon video, Pacemaker Dan was the guy who helped me run 2:25 during that race. And he is a sports physiologist with a very interesting podcast, which I will link in the description if you want to nerd out about all of this stuff even more. And he explained to me that your LT2 can be trained all the way up to 90% of your VO2 max in well-trained athletes. My LT2 is currently sitting at 83% of my VO2 max, and my LT1 is at 72%. What that means is there is very meaningful room to push both of those numbers up higher to get me running faster before my VO2 max is any kind of a constraint on what I can do during the marathon. What that means practically is if I can train my LT2 up from 83% to 88, 90% of my VO2 max, the pace at which those thresholds sit gets faster, without my VO2 max needing to change at all. And that is the entire focus of the build ahead. Lots and lots of threshold work. So that's where I am. VO2 max has held up way better than I expected. My economy hasn't gone anywhere at all, and those threshold numbers have a very clear direction of travel now that we know what we need to do. Upwards, that's the direction. And the important thing I keep coming back to after this testing is that it didn't just show me where I am, it showed me how I need to get to where I need to be. Exactly what I need to work on. And there's something really freeing about that. So next week, I'm gonna take everything this testing gave me, all of those numbers, most importantly, the training zones from that data, alongside the thresholds, and I'm going to turn it into something actually useful for your training too. I will show you how you can find your training zones in 3 different ways, from least scientific to most, including what to do if you've never set foot inside a lab before and don't intend to. If you want that video as soon as it drops, subscribe and hit the bell icon. And if this one was useful, a like genuinely helps more people find it. Love the grind.